welcome to the Paul Pate Podcast. This could be a first. I've got a group of 4 guests. I'm going to start with Andrea Molinari. Welcome, Andrea. You're the, I guess, the mastermind behind Shepherd, the comic book, which I got to read the first one, and it was great. So welcome. And we got your art team for the second book of the series. So you want to introduce us to the art team, Andrea?
Sure. Well, we can start as I see. I don't know if it's the same that you see, but we have Kate Kinsler, who is going to be a special cover artist for us.
Oh.
She's an iconographer. If you've ever seen icons, religious icons, she has formal training to do that kind of work.
Okay.
And I've asked her to do some special covers for us, so that's going to be her role. I just want to mention that one of our artists is actually not with us tonight, Ryan Showers. Ryan is the artist from the original series that is going to be doing a portion of the second story arc.
Okay.
He was supposed to make it tonight, but wasn't able to. Then we have, I'm just going in order here, Kyle Houston. Kyle is going to be doing, we actually have 4 interwoven stories in this new story arc.
Okay.
And he is going to be covering 2 of those stories. We'll talk as we go along about which those are. And then we have Cristobal. Cristobal is going to be doing one of the story arcs of the 4 in this new story arc.
Okay. So let's start. Welcome, everybody. Let's start with Kate. By the way, I feel a special kinship with you all because I'm an artist as well. So, Andrea, we've talked before, and we get along great. So, but Kate, let's start with you. Tell us about yourself, an iconographer.
Right. That's an avocation that I have.
Uh-huh.
And it keeps me sane with all of the other things that I do.
Uh-huh.
I'm actually a full-time canon lawyer for the Catholic Church, and I have a private practice. And I do a lot of work for the rights of the laity, of lay people, parishioners in the church. Yeah, and I just I do a lot of wading in the bovine excrement of the church. So to do an icon or to this kind of work is like a wonderful opportunity to delve into the spiritual realm of reality.
Uh-huh.
And that's really what an icon does. And my vision for the shepherd is that this be an iconic expression of who the shepherd is in relationship to to God, to the other life, to the scene, and to everyone that he meets. And it's an icon is a window into heaven. And for me, I think the icons that I will develop will be a window into the scene, because
Into the seam. I'm not.
scene. Yes.
I'm not sure I understand what you mean by that.
Andrea, maybe you could explain.
Sure. The seam reflects the reality of the shepherd's world. In the shepherd's world, there's a middle ground between heaven and earth that we call the seam. You could call it purgatory if you want, if you're more comfortable with that term. But it's that middle ground where for souls in particular that have trouble transitioning into the next life. And they have things that are kind of connecting them to this life that are still burdening them, and they need to be able to let go of that.
Right. Okay.
Right.
Wow, that's fantastic.
And I anticipate being able to, in the expression of the icon, to show how the scene moves into this world, how it's in the other world, and how it really makes that connection between heaven and earth.
Right.
And I think I can do that with techniques of icon techniques. Yeah.
As the characters move from this world to the spirit, right? That's where the characters are going. So that's kind of the motivation behind that. Am I right about that, Kate?
Yes. And Andrea has described to me that the seam in these books begins very dark and very empty and very hostile.
Yeah.
And moves, though, into new life, and we'll be able to see that in the second book that this team is going to do, where it comes into beauty and almost like the colors of a rainbow coming into that. But then it also goes beyond that into like the cosmic expression of energy and light, the stars, the sky, the how big it is, and something that I plan to create for this icon.
And all of this in an icon.
Yes.
Wow.
It's all symbolism.
Yeah.
Because what it is it's writing the truth, which is what the shepherd is doing, but that's what an icon does. It writes the truth of information and of the spiritual realm. So icons work very well within this story because of the nature of the story of the shepherd.
I got you.
Which is how I got involved in this, because I was telling Andrea, I said, these are like icons, I'm going through the book, and I said, and we talked about that, and that's when he asked me to do this.
The cover. So you're going to be the cover.
Yeah,
I got you. Wow.
Yes.
So will any of your artwork be like icons throughout the book at all, or? We
haven't talked about that. I don't know because an icon is so different from what the graphic artist is doing.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I don't think so. At least that.
Okay.
I don't think
Maybe.
so.
It's to be seen, right?
It's to be seen, right? But
how about we move on to Cristobal? And Kate, that doesn't mean you jump in anytime. So it's free for all, right?
Sure.
Cristobal. So when Andrea says you're going to be doing two, were you the one that was going to be doing two parts?
Kyle.
Was.
Kyle's going to do two.
Doing two.
You're going to be doing. What does that mean? Are you doing the line art, the color, all of it, pencils?
Oh, if you're asking me, as the last time we talked about it, I was under the impression we're pretty much going to be doing, line art, coloring. Would that include word balloons, or was that going to be someone else?
No, that'll be someone else.
Okay, yeah. So pretty much all of the visual art, yeah.
Okay.
Andrea, is it all right if I spill the beans on how those four stories interwoven is reflected in the art?
Yeah.
Okay. So the way, as I understand, which I love this idea, is that there's going to be four main characters, four interwoven stories over the course of 6 issues, and within each issue, you're going to see a different perspective from each of those four characters. They're going to perceive things differently than the other ones. The best analogy I can think of is the Sandman series, where each character would perceive Sandman differently based on their own prejudices, basically. Prejudice might be a harsh word, but their own perspective.
Right.
And so, I'll be spearheading 2 of those issues, and even within those issues, there may be instances where the 2 characters you'll see more than one perspective per issue, basically. So one panel will be one character's perspective, and then the next one will be another character's perspective.
And it's going to be different artists?
Yeah.
Okay, so you guys are going to be working together, juggling this and working together. Andrea, are you going to be quarterbacking it?
Yeah, to some degree. I mean, it's kind of self-explanatory in certain ways, because they're each assigned certain characters, and so when those characters' stories begin to take over, it becomes clear, whose perspective needs to be pictured visually. Basically, the story deals with a particular area of the seam, this middle ground area, that is housing soldiers who have died in combat. And the thought process behind this is that my wife actually works for the VA and works with soldiers, Marines, veterans who have suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder. And as I hear these stories that she relates to me, it began to kind of percolate in my head, and I began to ask the question, here I am dealing with these supernatural stories. We have soldiers, Marines, and veterans that have experienced combat. They come back and they suffer from post-traumatic stress. But what if somebody fell in combat? What if somebody died? Would their soul be marked by this trauma that they experienced? And from a fictional point of view, I'm saying, yeah, they would be. And so each of these 4 characters is a soldier from a different time period and a different culture. We have four soldiers. The first one is, and I'll start with Cristobal's character. Cristobal's character is a French soldier by the name of Henri Jacques Tournier, and he is a soldier under Napoleon. He was part of Napoleon's famous campaign into Egypt and Palestine in 1798-99, and he dies in March of 1799 as part of the battle of the Siege of Jaffa in Palestine. Then we have the 2 stories that Kyle is spearheading. He's doing one. His name is Will Brannigan, and he's a member of the 13th Mississippi Infantry that was engaged in the Battle of Fredericksburg in December 1862.
Hoorah!
And, he dies there in Fredericksburg. He's a member, like I said, of the Confederacy. And then the other story that Kyle is doing, which will be very interesting, is a story about a U.S. Marine who dies in Fallujah, in the Second Battle of Fallujah in 2004, November 2004. And then finally, Ryan, our artist from the first story, is doing a totally different story. And the main character's name is Sandaqua. Sandaqua is a Wendat Huron Indian who dies in the Huron-Iroquois Wars of the late 1640s. So my point to you is that we have different cultures represented, we have different time periods, and each of these cultures and time periods, when they start to tell their story, we see it through their eyes. But they're coexisting. These soldiers are actually fighting side by side, unaware of the fact that the man fighting next to them as their comrade in this battle, is actually not what they think that person is.
They're from another time, another.
They
feel like they're alone together, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Cristobal. So you're responsible for the French soldier.
Correct.
What kind of research did you do, or are you planning to do to illustrate this guy?
Well, it's very interesting because already in the writing process and the development of the script, Andrea and Roberto, his son, who was co-writing with him, basically a lot of research was already done by them, and it's very interesting working with Andrea because he really respects what the artist brings. He's very good in terms of dialoguing and listening and so forth, and at the same time he's also willing to upfront to do a lot of research himself and share those resources for us to use as best fits the story and according to how we're going to do it. So he was kind enough to provide like a treasure trove, just a wealth. I got through Dropbox these marvelous images, both of Napoleonic uniforms of that era and specific to that particular campaign. He sort of doing his research, he realized that there were differences because of the environmental factors involved in being in Egypt and the climate and everything. And so there were even differences in the uniforms from other battles and things that would have been fought elsewhere by Napoleon's army. So all of that stuff, it's really fascinating. And then also a lot of, for example, old paintings and things that depict scenes such as, Napoleon visiting plague victims and things like that.
Right.
So he passed those things, and then, we've engaged in a very, very wonderful process of conversing, of constantly being in touch and sort of hammering out and me asking questions and him kind of, and then I do my own research. He's provided a wealth of information, but I'll still do my own searches also to kind of, when I have a doubt, how is that hat supposed to look? I see it in that, in that picture, but I kind of, at this angle, what should it look like? And, little things, little minutia like that. I think one thing he and I share in common is that, like I know for me, when I see let's say a period film, and it's a period that I'm familiar with, I get very sort of put off when I feel like it's not authentic, even down to things like the way people talk. You hear somebody from the 40s sounding like, like they're from the 1990s or something. To me, it just kind of throws me off completely.
Sure, if you're going to suspend your disbelief, you want it to be, you want to buy into it, right?
Right. I mean, you're gonna, anachronisms are gonna sneak in, I think, regardless. But and so with this one, it's like anything. I'm sure we're gonna miss something, but hopefully, people who are knowledgeable about the different periods that the artists that we're gonna be depicting, hopefully, it's our hope that they'll be able to say, man, that's pretty good. That's really, that's pretty neat how they got that,
Right.
As someone who's tried, this is just my opinion, it's hard to write authentic historical dialogue.
Indeed.
Because you either, like the two main tropes, the first one you mentioned, Cristobal, how people just use modern language in a past time, or they use what they think is authentic, but it is anachronistic.
Like get rid of all of the contractions and,
Yeah, exactly. So it's really hard. Like for me, like I have a side project of my own that I'm doing, or at least in the past, where it was set in ancient Rome, and that's really, I was actually having this same conversation with my brother about how to structure a dialogue when you're talking about something as old as ancient Rome, and it's just sometimes the language barriers can make it, if you do it exactly historically accurate, if it's not. If you don't know the slang from that time period, it can sound very stilted.
Right.
So it's hard. And I don't envy Andrea in that task. So have fun with that.
Actually, Andrea.
I love how you mentioned ancient Rome. And one of the things I always love is when you watch, films or television series set in ancient Rome, everyone knows that people in the ancient, Mediterranean were all English, So
Did you watch that Russell Crowe movie?
British.
Yeah, they're all British, So it's always interesting.
I think the only show that came close to capturing ancient Latin syntax was, did any of you see Spartacus? I apologize for digressing here. But
I've seen bits of it. I'm more familiar with Rome, with the series.
Everything in that show Rome was pretty good.
I thought so.
Spartacus, of course, was like, in terms of historical accuracy, just out the window. But they did a lot of cool stuff with the language. It was all English, but the syntax was Latin. So, for instance, in classical Latin, there was never any word for yes, is what I've heard. So, if a character was like, they would ask, oh, do you want that sword? They would reply instead of yes, they would say something like, I desire it. Stuff like that.
Oh, cool.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So I thought I was kind of impressed by Spartacus in that regard.
Andrea, it struck me as this would be like quite an undertaking to produce a comic book the way that you are with one artist, and now you're embarking on this with 4. That's got to be a feat. I mean, and geographically, where are you guys located? Not that matters, but it's just interesting,
Well, this is Kate.
Yeah.
I live in Rhode Island.
Okay. And
I'm over in California, right? I'm on the coast near the Oregon border.
Okay.
So like middle of nowhere.
And I'm in Miami.
And then Ryan is in the middle of all of it. He's in Omaha, Nebraska.
Literally the 4 corners of the country.
And you are directing this from Florida yourself.
I'm in West Palm Beach, so I'm actually closest to Cristobal. So we're probably about maybe an hour and a half, no more than 2 hours away from each other.
Okay.
So, I am not worried about working with the different artists. One is because I love artists, so I've really enjoyed getting to these conversations and that sort of thing. I'm familiar with their work, each of them, and I like what I see. I mean, like, for example, it's interesting listening to Kyle talk about these things, because one of the things that attracted me to Kyle's work was the historical accuracy. I saw his work on ancient Rome, and my area of specialty, Paul, you remember, is New Testament early church. So I have done a ton of work in, Roman and Greek history, literature. It's not just religious stuff, but a lot of the, historical material as well. So when I saw his artwork and I saw, like, for example, he drew Roman soldiers, and I watched to see what kind of armor is he going to put on these guys, and it was accurate. It was the right armor for the period that he was doing. And I was like, wow, somebody's doing something.
I have a friend who would argue against that, actually. I'm pretty good with my armor, but there was this one panel where he says it was slightly off, and he probably could go toe to toe with you on ancient Roman armor.
But you know what though?
But it was just the helmets. It was just the helmets. Actually, that's what it was. Everything else was fine. It was just the helmets.
Here's how this goes though. A lot of times is the author says, "Man, you draw good. I want to. Can you draw my book?" But Andrea came to you with not. You draw good. You draw historically accurate. Here's why. That had to feel pretty good. And I mean,
that was very important, because see, this story, there are two things that are really essential in this story. One is place, and the other is costume, because when these characters tell their story and we see through their eyes, it has to look like Fallujah, Jaffa, Fredericksburg, the North Woods of what is modern day Ontario. It has to have that kind of a feel of place. And if we lose that, if it's just generic, then something is going to be lost in the story. And then also, what do the characters look like? Like, for example, I had a devil of a time with the Wendat Huron, native, because a lot of the pictures we have are from a later period. And really, I'm real close to the earliest period of the white man making contact with this particular tribe. And so what they wear, in fact, one of the things that saves us in this particular case is I stumbled upon a diary that was written by a Franciscan brother who was a missionary in like 1617. His name is Gabriel Sagnard. And he actually lives with what we call the Huron. They didn't call themselves that. The French call them the Huron. But they call themselves Wendat, or there are other terms, for them. Now they're known as the Wendat or Wyandotte tribe. But we have a window into them because of this, French missionary, and he provides actually the first French Huron dictionary around that time, 1617, 1618, 1619. And our story is set about 20 years down the line from that, but it gives us the best beachhead, so to speak, into that culture to be able to deal with it, And then as part of my research, there's also a professor at the University of Buffalo that I was in dialogue with, read his book, and then called him up, spoke with him, and picked his brain about this. It's just a fascinating culture. All these stories are, the cultural reality that houses the story is really very, very important.
Now, The Shepherd, the initial volume was done by Ryan, but this is going to be over 6 volumes?
It'll be 6 issues, 6 individual issues that are woven together as one story called The Path of Souls. And, that's, the goal is what I really write is graphic novels. Like, you're not going to see me publish these individually in the sense of like issue 1 gets published and then somewhere down the line issue 2, we'll roll them all out all at the same time.
You're the Netflix of...
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. There's nothing worse to me than you have these series where they, I'm thinking there's one series, Cristobal and I actually talked about this. It's a ultimate in the Marvel Ultimate Universe, and it was like an Ultimate Hulk. And all I can remember, the artist was like Lenil Yu, who I find his work to be very, very good. I can't remember the author now, but they did like 2 books out of 5, and then it stopped.
Right.
And it was like there were years that went by.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how many
Plus,
years. There were years.
And
then you're sitting there going,
how is every story or every chapter 20 pages? It seems like, it's artificially...
well, ours are not. I mean, we're...
Right.
5 of the 6 issues are 25 or 26 pages. I was pretty disciplined. But then the 6th issue went off the hook. It's 37 pages.
Oh, man.
And I just said, well, it's the last issue, sue me. I was like, I have a choice. I can cut this short and kind of do violence to the story, or I'm going to tell the story that I want to tell. Yeah. And, damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead.
Just do like with the, in the 70s and 80s, they put the big blurb on the cover, double size, final
exactly.
issue.
Yeah.
That's too big to be a single issue and too small to be a double issue.
And the end of the story is worth the wait.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. If the final chapter is a little bit longer than the rest, that's, in my opinion, that's usually a good thing. People usually want that kind of closure.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, you're going to get real familiar with that, Kyle, because that's all you. Or I would say the lion's share of that chapter is you. I think, Cristobal, you have some of it, if I'm not mistaken, in the 6th.
I do. Yeah, there is some.
Now,
that's going to be a very interesting one visually to tell. I'm sorry, Paul.
No, that's okay. Do you have a history with comic books? I mean,
oh yeah. I mean, well, I've been a big fan ever since I was, my goodness, since I was about 9. I think it all fell in love when I was very small, and of course I'd watch the television shows at the time that we all grew up with. Bionic Woman and the $6 Million Man, Wonder Woman. I'm a huge Wonder Woman fan. That was sort of my introduction. And then the actual comic books, my older sister Maria got me into. Basically, she and I are huge fans. So, and we're both artists, and we've been kind of drawing our whole lives. So comics were sort of where... Comics and other things, but primarily comics and also religious art to a degree were sort of, and also, believe it or not, fashion were all places that I sort of visually cut my teeth, in terms of as a child growing up and learning how to draw, and then, learning from my sister's books as well, some of these classics, Byrne Hogarth, Dynamic Anatomy, and how to draw comics the Marvel way, and all these great things. So
the fashion is huge because you're drawing the clothes and.
Well, there's connections in all of it. I mean, the thing is, like, for example, in fashion photography, there's something about costume that has a parallelism in the superhero costume.
Right.
In terms of just dynamism and the way bodies move and the dynamics of bodily movement. And that there is, when you look at a Jack Kirby illustration, you look at the New Gods, duking it out or something, and there is a tremendous sense of style, that Vogue would envy. I mean, it's and then the religious part is just a perfect fit because really comic books are, they're so heavily archetypal,
right?
That they really these characters express, and a lot of the more successful. Efforts at writing, even in the movies now, with the upcoming Batman v Superman, when you listen to the writers and the producers, you listen to Snyder and what Chris Terrio has done with his script and so on, they know that they're dealing with basically modern, it's basically mythology in a secular culture, essentially, so there's a lot. And as someone I'm a university chaplain. I'm also a Catholic priest, and so I'm a friar in an order, in the Dominican order. So I'm very interested in all that. I'm very interested in how people, especially today, kind of put it together and bring their spirituality, implicitly or explicitly into these forms of fiction. The way we all do that. So I find that very fascinating.
Yeah, awesome. Kate. I could tell you always dreamed of doing art in a comic book, for a comic book.
Well, I put it this way: my whole life has been full of surprises. I'm on my 6th career. I'm living in Rhode Island, and I've met these wonderful guys. I mean, who could ask for more? But something that Cristobal was talking about, the spirituality. While these men are working with a very specific discipline of line, of shape, of energy, of color, all of that. I'm starting from a very spiritual space, because to write an icon, because an icon is not painted, it's written, because it's a word of God. It's it's a communication from the other side.
Okay.
And so I've been praying about this for already a month, and will continue to pray about it. I dream about it. I've imaged. I know what the icon's going to look like, and I see it. But it's a whole spiritual realm of unpacking what these men are doing with paint and line and shape and words and images. And the cover is going to be a spiritual statement about the whole thing, without having little bitsy pieces of things. It's just going to be there. It's a being there, a communication. But also
flashbacks of like Joseph Campbell in his lectures. I've seen videos of them. So yeah, I can't speak for anyone else, but it's really easy for me to imagine what she's talking about. Yeah. And that kind of the visual language of icons and the religions they represent.
Right.
This is brand new for me, Kate. I mean, what you're saying is I've never heard before, but it's fascinating.
Yeah.
I love it.
I don't know if I wasn't introduced as to my position in the world. I'm a Catholic sister.
Okay.
I'm one of those Catholic nuns out there that, whatever. So that the whole thing of the shepherd, this whole story, the essence of redemption, the essence of struggle and journeying through into that which one is meant to be, and walking with a person through that, is very much what my religious community has for its charism of walking with, of hospitality, of having a preferential option for the poor, of seeing all as gift from God in the mercy of God. That's who we are. So this icon, and being just an expression of these 6 books, these 6 chapters, is very much a part of how I see the world, and what is meaningful to me. Because I'm not sure we've said it yet, but this graphic novel is a theology book.
Yeah.
Wow. And that's not really that wild of an idea. Is that, if you think about, most comic books deal with, ethics and morals. I mean, whether it's the simplest concept of good versus evil. Yep. This is not news. Maybe no one's placed it in those terms before. Yeah, I'm sure that's happened, but maybe for you haven't heard it in those terms. But but it's if you look at so many of the graphic novels and comic books, how many times have you seen the devil appear as a character, or demons, or angels, or
his own comic?
Yeah, it's just it's the comics are rife with that. And I actually, Cristobal and I last week were on another podcast, and we were talking about how this idea of using sequential art to talk about spiritual or religious things is incredibly old. And I would reference to you the Egyptian tomb paintings. You've seen these before.
Yep.
Is where they actually they depict the judgment of the soul.
Yeah.
And if you look at them, you'll see that the soul is typically garbed in white. And they appear as many as 3 or 4 times in the sequence. First, the soul appears as offerings to a series of gods. Then they are presented in front of a scale. And typically the heart of the individual soul is weighed against the feather of truth. And if the feather of truth is heavier in the scales, then the soul passes the judgment, avoids the creature called Amut, which is the devourer of souls, and then is ushered into the throne room of the god of the underworld, which is Osiris and his 2 wives, Isis and Nephthys. But that's, those are 4,000-year-old plus tomb paintings that we're talking about, that are using the cartoon style to transmit religious ideas or theological ideas. So this is not anything new at all. I mean, it really is an old thing.
Nice. Yes. the cave paintings are on all the continents.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
So.
And they start as line drawings.
That's right. Like Lascaux or Altamira, there's absolutely.
And so the communication of one's soul, the communication of one's spirit, one's thought, one's relationship with the world is expressed in those very early cave drawings, like in France. You know, that was an expression of who these people were, and that's what we do in the contemporary world.
And there's a real history, a long history of the connection of the arts in general. I mean, the visual arts certainly, but even theater and other arts as a means also of catharsis and also of mediation, you know, mediating the divine, you know, as different cultures have understood it. So, I mean, certainly in the, you know, the Eastern Christian iconographical tradition that Kate is working out of, there's that sense of the icon as a window into the transcendent, a window to heaven. But also, you know, even like, for example, for the ancient Greeks, theater was considered to be, you know, involve the gods. I mean, when you, you know, you went to participate in a play, you weren't just watching a play. You know, there was this whole thing going on where you were kind of interfacing with, you know, with another world, you know.
And one of the things I was excited to hear was that, Kyle, you were talking about looking at the template of the first book, and you were using that or thinking of it or referencing it.
Yeah, I was using it as inspiration. Yes,
inspiration, and I think that's really really important, because for me, that first book, the color, the intensity, the energy, the use of color to tell the story, not along with the words, along with the figures, along with the action. The colors themselves told the story, and what this graphic novel is doing, what you men are doing beautifully, is you are just touching the very essence, like the chakra of people. You know, the color, you know, what part of the body, what part of the spirit of the person is being touched. Reiki, all of this is really being touched by the color that is being used. And in spite of anybody, I mean, in spite of oneself, no matter who reads this, whoever walks through this will be touched inside because of your skill and your discipline, but also your love for the color, love for the shape, the love for the word, love for that which you're doing, and that all works together.
One thing I can say about my communication with Andrea, brief as it has been, is you know, you're a professor and you're always imparting knowledge, it seems, but I get the warmest feeling from you, you know, and I'm sure that will be in the book as well. So, and this is a great conversation. I could go all night. It's you all seem to.
I'm loving it. I don't get to talk about comics and theology and iconography all in one conversation, so.
Yeah,
that might be dry topics for some, but for me, that's my bread and butter.
Awesome. I know as an artist, it's a solitary venture, and that's why I have this podcast. Is, you know, it's great to meet people and hear about what you guys are working on, and so I want to thank all of you, you know, for coming on. And this has been fun. I'm sorry we couldn't get Roberto, the other author, Andrea's son, and the inspiration of the beginning of The Shepherd. Am I right, Andrea?
Absolutely. Yes. Absolutely.
And then there was one other artist,
Ryan.
Well, the original artist. So I would love to speak to Ryan sometime soon too. So. And Roberto, where does Roberto live? In Michigan, right?
He's in Tampa, actually.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I got you.
He's actually in Michigan now. He's up in the Grand Rapids area, probably not far from you.
No, not at all. So. Is he visiting?
Yes, just visiting. We have family sprinkled throughout that whole area of the state of Michigan.
Neat. Wow. Nice. I just have a quick story about you know, how you guys are spread out all over the place. Have you any of you met in person?
Andrea and I.
Kate and I have, yeah.
Okay. But Kyle.
I think that's it.
Yeah. We'll work on that. That's
yeah.
I could go for Florida right now, sure.
Yeah.
We're getting 10 inches of snow.
Yeah.
That's right.
I have a friend, Jim, that lives in the Los Angeles area. He kind of got me into animation, and he's just the nicest guy. And met him on Skype, and he's been on the podcast. And he's working on an animated film with Bill Plimpton, who lives in New York, and they're working together. You recognize that name, Kate?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Okay. Anyway, so I was talking with Jim, like, it would be great to meet sometime, you know, maybe in a couple of years, you know, like my work might take me out to his area and I would drive out. Yeah, that'd be great, you know. Or he said, you know, at some point we may want to try to come to the university there in Michigan. Oh, yeah, you know, that'd be awesome if we could arrange that. Well, then, just like a week later, Jim posts on his Facebook page that him and Bill are meeting in Iowa for a show.
How about that?
And it just so happened that I was planning a trip with my daughters to go meet my mom in Iowa at the same time.
Wow.
So I called Jim and I said, hey, I'm going to be there. And I actually met Jim, and we picked up Bill Plimpton from the airport. And so it happened sooner than I ever anticipated. And it was a real treat. And it makes me feel like there's somebody looking out for me, you know?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So,
Very much.
Well, there's something, and I think there's something about the way that, you know, social media and this kind of communication has really changed the way people connect and relate to each other. You know, like Andrea and I, it's weird because we haven't physically met yet, and yet we communicate by video chat to talk about the story and this and that and catch up, and we do it pretty regularly. And we connected very strongly. So I feel like I've known him for years or something. It's really weird. So, you know, it's just interesting that technology really has changed, you know, all that stuff, you know.
Yeah.
And Paul, just to tell you this, you and I are going to meet sooner than you think. Gerdo and I actually got accepted to have a display at the Grand Rapids Comic Con coming up in October.
Okay.
It's going to be October 21st to 23rd. So I'm expecting to see you then.
Absolutely. I actually have a guy that I want to. Is it hard to get to get a table?
We applied for it a little early, so I don't know. I'm assuming that they probably are still taking applications.
Okay.
Because I know that they only let us know a couple of weeks ago. We haven't even been posted on their website yet. But I mean, I have the affirmation.
Are you guys in Artist Alley?
Yeah, we're going to be in Artist Alley.
Okay. My plan is to try to get there and share a table with another guy who's got a great book. And we're going to share a table in Artist Alley. So I better get cracking, right?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
I would.
Okay.
It's right in your home base. It's always those that you're the last to sign up for, isn't it?
Typically in any comic book convention, especially since they're becoming more and more popular, those spots disappear really quickly. Yeah.
Okay. Right. So are you a veteran of the comic book conventions, Kyle?
I wish. No. No, actually, truthfully, I don't. It's kind of a factor of geography. I've been living up here in basically the Northwest for the past 5 going on 6 years, and it's very isolated. I don't get out much. My wife and I try to go on trips whenever we can. And unfortunately, those conventions are a little bit out of my price range right now, both in terms of travel and all that stuff. So in some ways, it's kind of a nice thing. It's kind of, you're seeing how popular comic book conventions are getting, but
it's weird how mainstream they've become. I mean, it's kind of surreal.
It's just like any other convention. It's a place to network and honestly start projects and make money.
Definitely.
Not to sound cynical, but
that's where it's going to happen, and they're a lot of fun too. I mean, Andrea, I saw the pictures of you and all the costumed characters running around.
It's a lot. It is. It's a lot of fun, and that was the one you're referring to. Is that in a place called Bartow, Florida, which is it's south and east of Tampa and south and west of Orlando, if you can picture them, almost between the two, but south of them. And it's just a small town, but they did a sci-fi festival, and we did signing there, and they had a lot of people in cosplay, and even my youngest son cosplayed Doctor Who.
Awesome.
Yes.
Yeah, and he had a blast. But that's, people really enjoy that. There's a lot of like connections between the different, geek cultures, so to speak, the comic book, the sci-fi, the horror, all that stuff.
It was eclectic.
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. But my big highlight was that Chuck Dixon, the comic book writer, was there. He's famous, of course, that in the 90s was basically Batman. He was
yes,
Nightwing
I'm
and
a
Robin.
huge fan of him.
Detective. Oh yeah, I got a chance to meet him and talk with him for about 10 minutes.
Oh
and
my gosh.
I didn't get his autograph. I mean, I got a little too old for that stuff. But I enjoyed talking with him writer to writer, and we traded. What was nice is to hear that I asked him about. I provide, as Cristobal said, I'm big on providing references from my artists. I've got a ton of stuff Kyle hasn't even been hit with yet. I showed him a little bit, but he'll see that. He's working on another project. Come May, I own him. And and then I'll hit him with all of it. But it was interesting because, Chuck Dixon was saying that that he does that same thing, is provide references, but he said that a lot of writers don't. And I was kind of surprised because I thought to myself, the easiest way for me to communicate with my artist has got to be by saying, okay, I envision this house, here it is.
Right. Right.
And then, of course, you can riff on that or do whatever you want or, kind of throw it out if you need to. But
I remember
at least I'm giving you something to start with.
I remember reading The Punisher by Chuck Dixon. And what I really loved about it, I'm not a gun guy by any means. If there's a gun in the house, I'm nervous, But he had it was fun reading it in a comic book.
Sure.
Chuck Dixon had all these details about the guns and the weaponry that the Punisher used, to dismantle and cancel the bad guys.
Cancel the mobs, yeah. No, but that's important because if you're going to ask the writer to do a particular weapon,
or setting, whether it be in the ancient Ontario or France or wherever. Yeah.
Exactly.
Me, when it comes to those kind of issues, if we're talking about like continuity, that sort of thing, accuracy, the only way you can get it done is with passion. You have to be passionate about what you're drawing, whether it's a gun or the clothes or the setting. That was something my professors, when I was in school, were really instilling in me, is that you have to be ready to draw everything and anything. And
it
Andrea
helps
looked for a team that was going to be passionate about the subject matter.
Yeah, it helps that you all have a passion for the subject matter at which Andrea's writing about. Clearly you all do. So I look forward to it. It's going to be great. A great team. What is your finally, what is your publish date goal, I guess?
Well, I mean, obviously, it's going to be interesting. I would say 2 years would be my expectation.
Okay.
We may do it sooner than that. Part of the factor is I've never done one with 3 artists. I mean, technically, all 3 artists can be firing at the same time.
Right.
I'm not the kind of guy that is a slave driver type. I would rather stay out of their way and let their creative juices go. In terms of I'm happy. I love an interaction thing, but I don't want to try to control it. I think the worst thing you can do in a creative situation is try to control that. Right. I have a lot of faith. I know what these people are capable of doing, and I don't want to get in the way. I don't want to be the problem. I want to assist and facilitate as much as I can. But so I think a 2-year window for this with 3 artists working is probably pretty doable.
Great. Well, I look forward to getting that book in my hands, and thank you all for coming on. And anytime anybody wants to come back on and chat, throughout the process, tell me how much you're, oh, I can't do another page. You know,
if I have to draw another Marine,
I know the feeling.
I'm going to strangle somebody.
I understand. So
I just know how exhausted I was reading the script. I was exhausted.
Were you picturing?
Think about the logistics of.
Well, the way Andrea writes this, he gives all the details. He describes every scene, every square is explained, and the intensity, and it's action packed. It is always intense all the way through. And I was worn out.
I would love to see a sample of that. I would love to see a sample of that, Andrea. That would be awesome.
I can send you a copy.
Sounds like a script by Alan Moore, and I mean that as a compliment.
I take that as a compliment. I love Alan Moore. I think he's amazing. You know, I just basically when I write, and I've talked to I think each of you in different ways about this, but I kind of see a movie going in my head, and then what I do is I freeze frame it, I stop it, and then describe it, you know, and then let it run again and stop it and describe it. And one of the things that Ryan had to do is, I wish that he was here to say this, because sometimes he said, okay, that's going to be requiring more than a couple panels to do what you just want me to do. And you know, that's the give and take. One of the things that is the best part of this for me is the give and take between the writer and the artist. Because you really learn, and I told you this before, Paul, I really learned in that first book that you're not telling the story by yourself.
Right.
And that is a wonderful thing. You've got at least one more set of eyes working on it.
My favorite art forms are always the collaborative ones. Throughout my life, all of my best work has always been collaborative. It reinforces everybody's strengths. It really does.
The sum of the parts.
Yeah,
greater.
Yeah, it is.
Greater than the sum of the parts.
Indeed, it's great. It's greater than the sum. Absolutely.
And the energy, I think, between people is really creating a new entity.
Yep. And these relationships will be lasting and deep. And, all right, I really got to go.
Yes, all right. Add everybody on LinkedIn. Yes.
That's awesome. All right, listen, I will let you all know when it's up individually and on the podcast. And again, thanks for coming on, and farewell.
Bye.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you so much.
Everybody.
Have a wonderful rest of the week. Okay?
Great. Thank you.
And you guys as well. Have a great rest of the week.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Stay in touch.
Yeah.
Will do.
Yes.